I'm pleased to have on the show for the first time professor of law from the Nova Southeast University. He ran a spirited campaign against former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz for her congressional seat. And he's a real progressive who's helped lead the anti-fracking and anti-pipeline fight in Florida. Well, please welcome our guest, Tim Canova. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hi there, Jimmy. Thanks. Great to be with you.
Great to have you on. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions off the top, and then we're going to get into this pipeline deal we're talking about in the divestment. I just wanted to ask you real quick, how do you think progressives can win in this era of Trump?
Well, I think for the next 2 years, it's going to be very challenging. We're going to be on the losing side of a lot of votes, just because we're in the minority, as far as the Democrats are in the minority, I should say, which means progressives are in the minority in Congress, here in Florida, in our state house, in state legislatures all over the country. So I'm not sure we're going to have as many wins as losses, but we can resist. We can be protesting in the streets and civil disobedience, have spirited defenses, you could say, in these legislative bodies to slow things down. Even if we don't win, maybe we slow things down. We have to make the case so that hopefully some Republicans jump ship and on some key votes. You know, we almost were able to block the Betsy DeVos nomination because a couple of Republicans did switch sides. So, you know, the politicians follow the polls. If we can keep making the case and the polls reflect it, perhaps, we can stop some of the most radical parts of this Republican agenda.
Okay. And is there... I noticed again in the DNC, they're having a hard time admitting why they failed. And it seems like if you can't correctly diagnose why you lost, you're not going to be able to fix it and win the next time. And it seems like the Democrats are bent on sticking their head in the sand and they won't even acknowledge that they put their thumb on the scale for Hillary Clinton over Bernie in the primary when everyone knows Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to resign because the WikiLeaks email revealed that there was corruption in favor of the establishment candidate. So what do you think about that going forward?
Well, I agree with you. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. You know, we've seen Democratic debacles on election days in 2010, 2014, and now 2016. And, they go back to the same old tried and true methods of failure. I'm so tired of hearing Democratic establishment types talk about the need for party unity. The best way to reverse things in the Democratic Party is not to be embracing unity at all costs, but to be having an honest conversation about why the Democrats keep losing and to learn the lessons from that. And, I think there's a lot of fighting to go ahead in the coming weeks and months.
Okay.
Fighting within the Democratic Party, that is.
Yeah, it seems pretty. I'm not optimistic on the Democratic Party right now. So let's talk about what you want to talk about today. So what's happening in Florida with the pipelines, and tell us all about it.
Well, let me just add one more word about that. I'm not particularly optimistic either, but look, the way I went about it was trying to challenge a Democrat for her seat. And I think you need to see a lot more of that happening if you're going to change the Democratic Party. It's not enough to try to change it within the DNC or within the state parties. You've got to have new fresh blood, new candidates coming up and challenging incumbents in the primaries if you want to start changing this party.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I hope that happens. Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski and the Justice Democrats, that's their goal, to try to primary these corporate Democrats or corporate politicians. They're barely Democrats, so hopefully that happens. I think we need to try everything we can. Direct action, public protests, calling your representatives on the phone, which emails don't work. Calling works. So, and then we have to primary people, and I think we have to work outside the two-party duopoly also with other people. So I think there's a lot. We need to do everything because the Democrat Party lost its soul in the 90s when it got in bed with Wall Street. And this is the result. The result is they're wiped out from coast to coast. Because if we remember the famous saying, when people are given a choice between a Republican and a Republican, they choose the Republican every time.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's really, really what's happening. And it's kind of sad. And it's sad to see all those Senate Democrats going right along. You know, part of resisting someone like Trump is you have to have practice to resist. So maybe if they, instead of going along and confirming all those cabinet choices like Pompeo, maybe if they would have got together and started practicing how to resist, when it came time to really resist, they could do it. But they have no practice. So that I'll just put that out there. So let's go ahead and move on. And we're going to talk to you about what's going on right now with the divestment issue and the pipelines in Florida.
Sure. You know, and we came upon the divestment movement and trying to be a big part of it precisely because a lot of other avenues to stop these pipelines and to stop fracking seem to be closed off. Florida has to be one of the worst places in the world where you could be fracking. We have a very low water table and two very large aquifers that would be in danger from fracking. And, you know, the Obama Environmental Protection Agency took 5 years for its study to come out. It finally came out in Obama's last month in office. And it concluded that what we all knew from watching Josh Fox's Gasland 6 years ago, that fracking contaminates drinking water. And we are fighting fracking here in the state of Florida. A number of key legislators have introduced bills in our state House and our state Senate. And I should say, not just Democrats, Republicans have also introduced legislation to ban fracking in Florida. It's a tough road to get through this legislative body. Rick Scott, the Republican governor, we don't know if he'll veto that kind of legislation. We've talked about trying to get a referendum on the ballot in 2018 to stop fracking. That's, 2 years down the road. We got to stop not just fracking, but there's a pipeline being built here in Florida called the Sabal Trail Pipeline. And, we like to say that Standing Rock is everywhere. And really, if you take a look at the map of the United States at the pipelines that are being built, it does seem to be everywhere right now. And the pipeline, the Sabal Trail Pipeline, is really emblematic of how crazy this is. They want to turn the entire state of Florida, apparently, into Flint, Michigan. This pipeline is a 515-mile pipeline, and it will transport, when completed, 1 billion gallons of fracked gas a day. Why? Not for use in Florida, but to export in the form of liquefied natural gas, presumably to China. And for that, we're going to endanger our drinking water. Now, that's not an overstatement to say we're going to endanger the drinking water. This pipeline is going right through, I should say, and underneath some major rivers, but it's also sinkhole country. And, I don't know if you remember, just a couple of years ago, there was a Floridian who was asleep in his bed when a sinkhole opened up underneath his house and swallowed him up. I mean, the man was never even found. Sinkholes open up unexpectedly in, this part of the state, the northern and central part of the state. If a sinkhole should open up underneath this pipeline, it's game over. The pipeline will crack open and 1 billion gallons a day will start flowing into the aquifer. This is one of the world's largest aquifers, a very shallow water table, and it's like they're playing Russian roulette with this aquifer. At the same time, we've got a separate aquifer in South Florida that is endangered because of saltwater intrusion, which is a result of the rising sea levels from climate change. So, Florida is really on the front line here. We have the most to lose from climate change. We have the most to lose if our water supply gets contaminated by fracked gas, and we've got to fight back. And our tools are somewhat limited. I should also mention, Jimmy, that Governor Rick Scott has personally invested over $700,000 in these pipeline companies. So we turn to Senator Bill Nelson, a Democrat, and we hand him 90,000 petitions. We did a petition drive and we got more than 90, we're almost up to 100,000 signatures now. And we can't get any response from Senator Nelson's office. Well, lo and behold, perhaps the reason why is that he's taken over $70,000 in campaign contributions from these same pipeline companies. So our tools to fight it are somewhat limited. The political process, the establishment of both parties seem to be closed off from helping us in any way. The irony is when Bill Nelson voted against the Keystone XL pipeline, he said one of the reasons he was voting against it was his concern for the aquifer that provides drinking water for millions of people in the Midwest. He doesn't seem to be as concerned about the drinking water in his own state. So how do we fight back? And that gets us to the divestment movement. You know, a lot of folks, especially people who've been around for a while, will remember that the divestment movement was very effective in helping put pressure on and bring an end to apartheid in South Africa. And, you know, it took some years. We don't have years right now. These pipelines are being built as we speak. The Sabal Trail pipeline could have gas flowing through it by the summertime. And while we don't have a lot of time, we do have social media. They didn't have that when we were fighting apartheid in South Africa. So we're looking to organize college campuses all over the state of Florida to try to get students and alumni and faculty involved in pressuring universities to diversify, or I should say divest their endowments out of fossil fuels, out of these pipeline companies, and into solar. You know, it used to be when you talked about solar, people would, you know, kind of roll their eyes and think you were, you know, talking about something futuristic. At this point, you just have to look at Germany and China to see thriving solar industries. And Germany is now producing an awful lot of solar energy. You know, if you took the 515 miles of the Sabal Trail pipeline by 50 meters wide, and you took only half that acreage and put solar panels on that acreage, you'd produce more energy than is being produced by that frack gas going through that pipeline. So twice in the past year, voters in Florida voted for solar. We had a referendum that was on the ballot the day I was on the ballot, August 30th. And for a referendum to pass in the state of Florida, it needs 60% of the votes, and we exceeded that. So we have, you know, Democrats, Republicans, Greens, even Libertarians and independents who have been supporting solar in Florida. They're way ahead of the politicians on this because the politicians are in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry.
So the divestment, now we just saw in Seattle, you mentioned it to me yesterday and I looked it up. It's great what happened. Their whole city council unanimously voted to divest from Wells Fargo, not only because of their funding of the DAPL pipeline, but also because of their unsavory business practices where they commit fraud on their own customers.
That's right.
So how do people, do you want people to, you want people to divest from the banks that are financing this pipeline, correct?
Exactly. The pipelines themselves, the companies involved, Next Era, Florida Power and Light, we've got Duke Energy, and Spectra. Spectra is a big company that's involved in this. And then the banks that are supporting these companies, including Bank of America is a big one, and Wells Fargo. Folks can go to SpectraBusters online and to our website, progressforall.org. We're in the process right now of updating our website, but we're going to have very up-to-date information within a couple of days. So again, that's progressforall.org. And folks have to start organizing wherever they are. Obviously, people in the state of Florida can help organize their college campuses. Those who are alumni of some of these colleges, we're going to be helping them organize as well. And Seattle was an inspiration. We're now going to be reaching out to cities and counties around the state of Florida, asking them to divest their monies out of the banks that are funding this pipeline.
So, you know, the problem, one of the problems, how do you tackle the problem of the fact that there's only 5 banks in the country? And so now if people are divesting from Wells Fargo and then they divest from Bank of America, there's only, what is there, 3 more banks left? I mean, go ahead.
You know, that's one way to look at it, Jimmy. You know, after the financial crisis, you know, the top 6 or 7 banks now control something like 2/3 or more of the nation's banking assets and deposits. But there's still plenty of banks in that other 30%, you can say. I personally divested some years ago. I closed out my bank account in Bank of America. I've been teaching regulation of financial institutions for many years. You know, that was the main reason I divested at the time, was because of the lending practices of Bank of America, much like you mentioned with Wells Fargo. So I shifted my banking to a community bank. That community bank happened to have then been bought up by a commercial bank, but it's still a regional commercial bank. So there are options for folks out there. I would recommend looking at community banks, local credit unions. Those are usually financial institutions that'll take better care of you anyway.
Yeah, we moved
what Wells Fargo did to its own customers was outlandish.
Outlandish. They committed fraud on 5,000 of their own customers. Well, 5,000 people had to get fired. They opened up a couple million bogus accounts in their name, didn't tell their own customers. Nobody goes to jail, right? Because it's a bank. So banks.
That's right. And the 5,000 tellers, so to speak, that opened up these accounts were pretty much following orders.
Right.
And for following orders, they got fired. And, the managerial class does quite well. They pretty much have their stock options and haven't suffered as a result.
So if we could divest, Bank of America, Wells Fargo are the two big banks. The Jimmy Dore Show does our banking with the California Credit Union. So that's the way we go. So yeah, try to credit unions, community banks, and so people will do that.
And I'll say, I hope the wave of the future are state-owned public banks. I know in California there are a bunch of jurisdictions that are trying to open up their own state banks. The Bank of North Dakota has been a model for 100 years. Unfortunately, the Bank of North Dakota has been following, you could say, local public opinion in North Dakota, which supports that Dakota Access Pipeline, and they've helped invest in that pipeline. But in California, I know that there are attempts to create community banks and public banks in Oakland, in Richmond, in Mendocino County, all over the state of California, Pennsylvania, all over the country. People are talking about public banking.
That's definitely what we need to do, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be the political will to do what they're supposed to, which is break up the banks and put some of those guys in jail. So
maybe the next financial crisis, but we can't hold our breaths on that.
Yeah. So and it's coming, by the way. So it's coming. Barack Obama bailed out that equity firm Blackwater on his way, Blackstone on his way out at the office, right? So what he did was create a bigger barrier for first-time home buyers, because now rents and home prices are artificially inflated because the government is now playing crony capitalism and backing up these predatory equity firms, correct?
Oh, yeah, correct. Don't get me started. For years as a law professor, I've been writing about the central bank, and you take a look at the Federal Reserve's response to the financial crisis. In the first 2 years after the crisis, the Federal Reserve made more than $29 trillion in low-interest loans, and I mean loans at 0.25% to the largest banks and hedge funds in the country and in the world, and did very little, really nothing, to help working-class folks, the Main Street interests. And that's a contrast to how the Federal Reserve responded to the financial crisis of the 1930s. Where you saw the regional Federal Reserve banks actually making hundreds of millions of dollars of loans to small businesses, to Main Street interests.
Yeah, and I know after the crash, my brother is in construction. He owns a construction company in Chicago, and he couldn't believe they couldn't get money. Nobody could get money to finance projects because the banks were taking all that TARP money and using it for more speculation, which is amazing.
That's right. We're used to using the word trickle down to describe fiscal policy, tax cuts for the very wealthy and hoping it trickles down to the rest of us. We've had a trickle down monetary policy approach now for many years. And a lot of that money isn't trickling down. It's inflating securities markets. It's inflating real estate prices. And, I think you're right to worry about an asset bubble that could be bursting.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and predict it. But I do think that they're going to stop the pipeline and the frack. See, that the craziest thing is that these pipelines, that they're the Keystone Pipeline, that's Canadian oil going to the Gulf of Mexico to go to China and other places. That doesn't help America. It's not American oil. It's nothing. It just puts money in the pockets of oil companies that doesn't trickle down. And the same thing seems to be happening in Florida, where they're going to frack this gas, turn it into and put it in a pipeline so they can ship it around. So this doesn't help the country at all, but it has an amazing potential downside to the country. And I think that they will stop those pipelines in Florida as soon as one breaks and pollutes your aquifer.
Well, unfortunately, that's what it might take. What's shocking to me, you can go online and research this. There's a lot that's now been written about it, but the largest water conglomerates in the world are now in league with the fracking companies. And now part of it is that the fracking process requires a lot of water. So,
Right.
they're going to make money on the fracking process. But a nice side benefit of it, of course, is that as the fracking leaks and spills into the aquifer, poison the drinking water, the water companies can sell us bottled water. I guess we'll be taking our showers in the future with bottled water.
Yeah, we'll be the USA of Flint. So,
Exactly.
well, listen, Tim, is there anything else you want to? So people can go to the Spectrum Busters, and they can also go to your website, which is, say it again.
Yes, it's progressforall.org.
Okay, progressforall.org. We can get more information. People in Florida need to organize, and you're trying to do it through the college campuses. That's a great idea. People divest, get into a community bank or a credit union. And anytime we can help you out again, Tim, just let us know.
I will, Jimmy. Thanks so much. Keep
All right.
up the good
You keep up the good work.